Walt, another week, another Waymo expansion. Waymo's gearing up, putting gas in the engine if they had an engine, and they're going full steam ahead. While Waymo expands, I know. You're very excited for the big game this weekend between the Eagles and the Cowboys down in Dallas. While you're excited for that, I'm excited for the autonomy battle that's emerging there. While the battle emerges in Dallas, the robo market's also emerging around sidewalk delivery. They're measuring whose robot's bigger. Haha, no pun intended. And then there's Zoox. They announced a tiny little section of San Francisco. I could probably hit it with my driver. And then at the same time, 10,000 cars they said they could produce. But let's start with Waymo and the ongoing expansion. What do you make of it?
So the expansion specifically is, or we just have a slew of additional releases again from Waymo, Minneapolis, Tampa, and New Orleans. So to me, the question is always going to be on supply. Like press release after press release, do they have the supply to provide there? But I think there's also some regulatory issues that exist in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis today, you cannot legally operate, and this also applies to the state of Minnesota, you cannot legally operate a full driverless vehicle in the city or the state, and that law has to change. And we saw the elections in Minneapolis, very progressive city council, and we've seen through Boston, we've seen through Seattle, other progressive cities, and New York. They don't necessarily like autonomy, so Waymo's got some policy issues to overcome.
Yep, so we'll see. I mean, these are, again, press release announcements. There's still a lot of things not announced. First one we'll deal with is the partners. I know this is something that we've rehashed many times in recent week. We had our big, podcast a couple weeks ago where we referenced a divorce with Uber. Obviously, Uber's not in any of the announcements. We're not going to rehash our concerns about Uber and Waymo. But I guess should we even consider it odd? Because there's never been, this is not part of their process to announce partners when they talk about, hey, we're going to go into these new cities.
I got to tell you, I don't have the Clouseau hat on today. I got the autonomy hat on, but something doesn't add up here. I'll use the kids' term. Something doesn't smell right here is how I would describe it.
The other thing I wonder about is like Waymo, especially if you're talking about Orlando, has an opportunity for a non-traditional partner. I mean, Disney's got a massive complex there. Reedy Creek and Disney is about 25,000 acres, 134 miles of roadways. Can you imagine Waymo's already in limited supply. You wrap them with some Disney characters and have them, connect all of the different hotels owned by Disney with all the different resorts as an added service. It's obviously very futuristic, right? It fits with kind of the Tomorrowland thing. I mean, and they can, again, additionally fragment the market in individual markets where they don't necessarily become reliant on one major partner. And this fits in with what I like to call the Grayson specials. You love partnerships as it relates to autonomy.
You are right. But you know what? There's one rule if you're going to deploy, and I'll tell you after this, that one rule, if you're going to deploy an autonomous vehicle at Disney World that you have to meet, that Waymo cannot meet today. You ready for this? Mickey Mouse has to fit inside the vehicle. Mickey Mouse cannot fit inside of a Jaguar I-Pace.
Why does Mickey Mouse have to fit inside one of these vehicles? Because you can just have it for the guests to get around. And by the way, why couldn't they send some Zeekers down there? You don't think Mickey could fit into a Zeeker vehicle? That's pretty sizable.
Potentially, but then let's look at politics. Putting a Chinese-made vehicle at Disney World, you think Governor DeSantis, and if it's the next governor, Brian Donalds, is going to go for that, it's going to be the Reedy Creek show all over again.
But what's the issue though with the size of the car in Disney? Like, why do they care about? You think about the mouse getting in there?
I like what you think. So let's go back in history here. Voyage, long time ago when Oliver Cameron founded Voyage, this is pre-acquisition from Cruise, was actively in discussions with Walt Disney World to deploy it there. Really, another interesting requirement outside of Mickey Mouse fitting in the vehicle, they wanted to take the LiDARs on the left and right side of the vehicle and make them look like Mickey Mouse ears. Because you have to remember, it's about the magic, it's about the experience. And then there is another company that's no longer in existence today. Use your imagination. They were in discussions as well with Disney World, and Mickey Mouse did fit inside that vehicle, even though that vehicle was never massively produced.
You know what's pretty magical, Grayson? Getting into a car that doesn't have a driver. You would think that that's enough. Again, you wrap the car, sure, put some stuff over the LiDAR if they can still remain functional that way. I don't know. I still think it's a large organization. Disney, huge company. I know they've looked at getting into the mobile business historically, looked at buying Spectrum, all because of leveraging the brand and the plot. I mean, this would be an obvious type of partnership. Not that Disney would want to service vehicles on a nationwide basis, but from a branding standpoint, if you have the vehicles in Disney World and you wrap a couple of vehicles in these other individual cities, and there's again a partnership opportunity there. I don't know, just a thought.
Okay, so you're going down the right track. Now, you got to remember the old Walt Disney saying, plus it. That's what Walt Disney would always say to his Imagineers, plus it, make it better. And I'll give you an example that Disney did look into. They did not commercialize it, but they did actively look into it, was picking up passengers at MCOs. And in Disney, they call it Mickey's corporate office. Because when you're going to Disney World, you're going to spend a lot of money. Where you would get picked up, you would use your magic band, and you have a profile, and that vehicle, when you get inside, the whole inside the vehicle is augmented. If you're going to Star Wars Hotel, which is now defunct, it would take you there, and you're in one of the Galaxy Cruisers, you're not actually in a vehicle to have that whole interactive experience. So one, they wanted to do that to control the guest experience. And then two, it's a way to optimize RevPAR, which is revenue per available room. So they know when you're coming and going to optimize the room flow. So they've looked into it, but it's just truly, it's sad that they haven't gone forward. And I can also tell you that inside of Fort Wilderness, they looked into doing Mickey Chippendale inspired delivery robots. Again, they never went forward. Disney they go 9 steps forward and then they never take that 10th step. And so it's been an ongoing process. And you could say that I've had a lot of interesting conversations with a lot of individuals that you call cast members.
I would say this though. I mean, Google's already talked about putting Gemini in the car. The in-car experience is clearly important to them. There's been plenty enough comments about that. It's not necessarily a volume-driven type of thing that they need to do here, right? They can do it with a handful of cars for these high-end attendees, people that are going to get the private tours and things like that. And it can be an early version of how they can drive an ad business, from what's interior to the car and exterior to the car. So I don't know. Seems like an obvious partner, but I guess we'll have to see how things play out there. So in addition to those 3 cities, there was other press releases, and I know Waymo loves to issue, and there's tons of press releases. And Waymo said they're going driver out in Miami, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Orlando. These markets are ones that we've clearly heard of before. And I also find it funny to say that you're driver out. Like, isn't Waymo, at least in my mentions, everyone always tells me Waymo's the one that's driver out, not Tesla. But I guess, there are stages where, Waymos aren't driver out. So I get a little confused with this. Can you help me understand all the different stages from, whatever the earliest stage is to, the final stage, which is commercial launch?
Well, let's break it down, Walt. We're going to go back to autonomy kindergarten. We're going to break down the 6 stages of Waymo autonomy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 stages of Waymo autonomy. Stage 1, testing. Waymo puts out a post on X, or sometimes a very small one-line post on their Waypoint blog, said Waymo will begin testing in the city as we consider or explore an active deployment. The city the most commonly affiliated with that today is your beloved New York City.
So testing, but they always announce it. There's never been a situation that you can recall where there was Waymos just showing up in the city and Waymo had not yet announced it.
There was, and I'm going to have to be fact checked on this, there was an incident where a photo went on X or it went on Reddit before the Waymo release came out. So there was a time that I remember somebody did get ahead of it. But the majority of the time, there's an announcement, and then hours later, or sometimes a day later, you see the vehicles.
So can I assume that stage 2 is road trip? And are we sure that New York is not technically a road trip city? And what's the difference between testing and road trip?
Well, if I'm going to put on my political hat here, but I have a political hat on. Maybe we should get one of those, the Abe Lincoln hat. To me, a road trip to a certain city, a certain population could be considered incendiary, where it is saying that Waymo is going to deploy in this city, where testing is not. because they're testing in Buffalo, winter testing. They're testing in Kirkland, Washington, and haven't deployed there. But in road trip cities, they're saying that they're going there.
So our stages 1 and 2 sound pretty similar. It sounds like it's just some perhaps wording issue to deal with local politicians. But what do we have for stage 3?
Stage 3, the flag planting. The vehicles are there, and I'm going to estimate, say 10, 20 vehicles are in that city, and they begin manually testing in that city. So the vehicles are physically there, they're manually testing. That's the flag planting. Waymo's saying, we're here, we're preparing, we're getting ready to scale.
Okay, so in that case, we're still in the flag planting. You still have a driver behind the driver's seat. It's not no driver out or anything. It's an announced city that you're doing testing. I mean, honestly, these first 3 stages sound very similar.
They are. There's a common denominator in stage 2 and stage 3, manual driving. The testing in certain applications, they have done it supervised driving. So just a clarity there. But there are a lot of similarities between stage 1, 2, and 3. I know it's a lot to digest, but you got to stay with me.
I'm trying my best. Now, what happens in stage 4?
Stage 4, the safety driver. The Waymo vehicle is driving itself with a safety driver behind the wheel. That's stage 4.
Now, this doesn't seem like, as opposed to a manual driver. So someone not touching the wheel. So this, I don't recall seeing many press releases about this. So stage 3 and 4, meaning the flag planting, are probably it's just another mode within the same city. It's just now we're picking things up on Reddit or from friends that are sending us pictures saying like, oh, this guy doesn't have his hands on the wheel. Is that the difference? Or am I wrong and they're actually issuing press releases when they go from testing with a manual driver to using a safety driver?
You are correct. And sometimes there is an formal press release. There's just most likely a post on X. But yes, you are correct.
Stage 5, what's that?
Stage 5, Ghost Rider. And that's what they announced in Miami. They are testing, not commercially operating yet, but they're testing with no driver behind the wheel. This is the first time that I've seen them acknowledge that publicly in a long time, and that they said that they're going to be opening service soon, but they're currently testing with no human in the vehicle.
So how did they, I didn't miss it. It was a busy week for me. A lot going on, obviously, with Warner Bros. and what have you. They issued a press release and they basically said, we're going driver out in Miami, Dallas, and Houston. And this was a press release worthy item for them.
Yes. And don't forget, they also announced San Antonio and Orlando as part of that release as well.
I mean, so this company is basically a press release machine. Every minor addition to how they're moving through these markets. No wonder we have so much to talk about on Autonomy Markets. And then obviously stage 6 is commercial launch, the most important thing. So I guess the relevance for Miami is we're close to the end, right? Where they've finally taken the driver out. How long do you think this stage 5 process, where you do not have a safety driver in there, the final leg of what I would call testing, how long do you think that occurs before we see service? And let's focus on your home state and specifically in Miami.
I wake up every day. I open the Waymo app to check if I can ride in the vehicle. It's not listed on the map. Next week, as you know, is Thanksgiving, and the week after that is Art Basel. I'll make a prediction here. The service will open sometime before December 5th when Art Basel opens. So the next 2 weeks, it'll be open.
But I don't think you have to wait for your app to show that. I mean, I think you're going to see, since they're a press release happy company, you're going to see some tweet going out saying, hey, we're live in Miami now.
And then you put on Will Smith, play the Miami song. See, that's when it happens.
I guess my other question on these cities now that have gone on to driver out testing, kind of this last stage before commercial, all Sunbelt cities. Do you see any kind of relevance to them kind of bundling that in the same announcement, either from a political perspective, a weather perspective, anything?
From a political perspective, Texas and Florida have 2 of the greatest laws on the books as it relates to the deployment of driver out commercial vehicles. So from a regulatory standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. Also, from a weather standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. We're in the dry season in Florida, so you don't have to deal with the hurricanes and the monsoons. And then in Texas, you're in the dry season as well. So you have dry seasons in both states, great regulatory environments. So those two things make it a really great time to launch.
I also have in my notes that one of these cities, Dallas, which you mentioned that, is important to me, at least for this Sunday. By the way, people of Dallas are great. As much as the Cowboys, are the enemy of the Eagles, people from Dallas are among my favorite in the country. But I think there was some indication that they're going to launch in a few weeks. So a 2025 launch. First of all, where did that come from? Was that an announcement from them? Did we hear this on Reddit? Like, where are we getting that from?
Drum roll, please. Waymo press announcement. There's another one for you.
So we're going to call this stage 5.5, I suppose, where they say something's going to launch in a few weeks. Putting that aside, again, props to, by the way, the Waymo PR team. I think this is the way to do it. More information in this regard is always better than less. Getting local press hyped up about the arrival of these cars. But for Dallas, I think if you went back to the initial announcement, which was not long ago, right, July of this year, the plan was to launch in 2026. There was no, I don't think, specific timeline of that. Even if they said early 2026, it's kind of surprising in a positive way that they can launch in 2025, like delivering ahead of schedule. They will talk about, this is the generalization, right? This is AI. This enables us to do markets faster. I get that. That's a great part of the narrative. To me, the other part of the narrative is like, we've been kind of harping on the supply, and yet here they are able to, actually launch a market in Dallas, hopefully, with enough supply, which in my mind, it's got to be at bare minimum 50, quickly getting to a couple hundred in that market for it to be a real market for Dallas.
The most impressive part of this, they're ahead of schedule. Waymo is launching a city ahead of schedule. That's impressive. If you stay within the Texas triangle, do some of those cars come out of Austin potentially, since it's just a hop, skip, and a jump away to get that inventory up there?
I don't know. I wish there's a better way for us to track this, whether they're reallocating inventory to launch new markets. I'm not sure what's going on in Austin. Obviously, we've got plenty of questions there. On the flip side, and the questions that we have in Austin, this is also a good sign about Avis. And because for our listeners, if you might not remember or you might not recall, Avis was the partner for Waymo in Dallas. And like this was their first market in this partnership. So maybe this speaks to, how quickly Avis can ramp their capabilities and being a good partner for Waymo.
I'll tell you point blank, if Avis played a large role, which we assume, and we do not have any facts to back that, if Avis played a large role and Waymo was able to launch ahead of schedule, to me, that's a positive catalyst that could potentially open new markets to Avis as they scale.
I can't imagine we won't see additional markets with Avis. Again, we'll see how they execute. This is a good sign for execution that they're willing to launch earlier than expected. So again, that's an important leg in the stool that we've talked about many times in this podcast. Finally, the other fascinating thing about this, and perhaps the real driver of why you accelerate this in this market, is there's competition there. And there is plans with AV Ride, long-term plans, to launch with Uber in that market, which we've talked, and questioned, friend or foe. And AV Ride is reliant upon Hyundais, right? And the Hyundais are the exact car that we're waiting for in terms of Waymo to help expand the capacity. So for Waymo to launch in Dallas, perhaps ahead of AV Ride and Uber, has, I think, multiple, if you're really getting your competitive juices flowing, multiple, I think, benefits from them within the kind of the tech, people that follow. And also, by the way, you've got Lyft with Mobileye. People have, we've all fallen asleep on Mobileye to a certain extent because their business strategy is focused on dealing with the OEMs. But in this case, Lyft with Mobileye, can you remind me which car that's with? But they will also be in Dallas.
We don't know. Again, press release from Lyft. There was no details in the press release. It said 2026. We don't know Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. We don't know. But I'll tell you something. It's fascinating that Waymo could potentially launch before Uber and AV Ride. They're going to start competing head to head at some point in the next 3 to 4 weeks in that market. And just for the audience to clarify, spoke with AV Ride that AV Ride will be launching with a safety attendant, not a safety driver, very similar to what Tesla's doing. And also just want to point out the little caveat there.
Grayson, hopefully this works out for perfect timing for Forward Fort Worth. which is a great conference, great people, so we can test all these things. Sounds like maybe Lyft and Mobileye and the AV. Well, we'll definitely see some version of AV Ride while we're there. Maybe it won't be commercial yet with Uber, but we'll certainly get a sense of where they are with Hyundai at the time. But cues us up for an exciting March to come up.
Perhaps if Hillwood, Ian Kinney, and Mr. Perot have their way, those autonomous vehicles could make their way to Fort Worth. You never know. It's going to be an exciting time down there.
Yeah, I mean, I love Fort Worth as well, but a great area, and I can't wait to see what happens in Dallas. But obviously fascinating, and maybe that was the driving force. We'll have to do some more work. And for our listeners, if you have any, good insights on, Dallas and Avis or Avomo, just let us know. Meanwhile, so these are great things that are happening for Waymo. And there are on the flip side, we'll talk about the challenges, which are not really of their design, but they have to deal with. And you've got, San Diego, New York City, and Seattle. Why don't you run us through what's going on there, Grayson?
So in San Diego, you're the head of the San Diego Taxi Advisory Committee at the Metropolitan Transit Systems. He has come out against autonomous vehicles, wants to ban them in San Diego. They're trying to overturn California law, which thank goodness it happened, where there's preemption. It's a very good thing where San Diego cannot enforce policies around autonomous vehicles. Mayor Bass, the infamous Mayor Bass in LA, she tried the same thing. It failed. So look for this scuttlebutt in San Diego to kind of fail. However, the interesting thing is San Diego is the closest city to the U.S.-Mexico border in California. And there's also right over that border a BYD dealership. And we have photos of the Geely Zeekers all in San Diego, and that's got people all riled up. Is BYD next? So that's something to watch there in San Diego.
And then what about New York and Seattle? Also similar problems there?
Yes. Oh gosh, New York. Where do the problems begin? We don't know.
Where do they end? I think you meant where do the problems end?
I'm going to stand where do I don't even know where they begin or where they end. Who knows? Right now, we know the mayor of New York is currently in the Oval Office with the president, so we'll see where that goes. And then back in New York, you have a local council member by the name of Justin Brannan, who has introduced a bill at the local level, and they don't have preemption in New York, to ban autonomous vehicles in New York City. I told you, and we talked about this, that it was going to be a problem. And so what else did this local council member do? He bailed out the Medallion Fund. Do you remember that, Walt? You cover Wall Street. They had to go bail out those banks that funded the medallions. And then he wants to ensure with the Uber and Lyft drivers have all these benefits and perks. So isn't this funny how everything is starting to turn? Oh, Uber and Lyft are bad. Oh, no, we got to protect them. The tide's turning. Waymo's got a lot of policy issues bubbling up here.
Well, in New York City, maybe it's a blessing. I was in the city. I drove in the city to see Wicked, the premiere. And, the streets there are literally like a third world country. It's amazing how in one of our biggest cities in the country, they can't have basic infrastructure. So maybe it'll save Waymo on replacing a couple of their shocks and the suspension system on their cars until we go through a cycle where maybe we get some infrastructure investments. But look, New York's going to take a long time for a variety of reasons. Seattle, same issue, I think. I'm not concerned over the long haul. I mean, obviously, on the AI front, there's discussion of preemption there on a federal level. I think that obviously should at some point apply to autonomy, but there's enough forward-thinking states and cities that exist in this country that, it's not going to stop progress. And, to just continue to drive this theme home and to continue to pick at the scab, like scale is the big issue. Right, in volume. So we don't even have the volumes. Like you open up New York tomorrow, you don't have the cars that you need to really launch in that city.
I don't understand why nobody's reading the tea leaves. Boston, a progressive mayor. New York City, we all saw the polls, progressive mayor. Seattle, progressive mayor. What do these three progressive mayors in these three cities want? They want to ban autonomy. Why poke the bear this early on in the process when you clearly have a vehicle shortage?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're speaking to your constituency. Like people vote, they want a certain thing. There's definitely concern about jobs. Like this week we had, shouldn't have been a shock because it was preceded by a change at the CEO position of Verizon. They're going to fire 13,000 people for a company that's gotten local franchises. AI is not the reason they're having to fire those people, but it is a tool, right? So I think, they are doing what their constituency wants. I think there's obviously, we would all agree, long-term benefits, all those that listen to this podcast, and we'll just have to see, how that plays out. My point is, like, who cares? Like, these are important cities, but there's other cities where we will ramp volumes. We'll see the benefit both to the economy and to the people and the safety of their citizens, and those things will happen. But, getting back to the scale issue, in a completely different industry segment, food delivery, which is part of autonomy. You have a company, Starship, which claims that it's the largest autonomy delivery fleet. And if you're the largest autonomous delivery fleet for food, how many robots do you think that would encompass?
I know the number, but I'll answer it if I didn't know the number. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000.
It's 2,700. It is 2,700. These 2,700 robots, with props to Starship, have done 200 million road crossing, 9 million deliveries. That's great. And they're targeting 12,000 robots by 2027. For context, also Serve Robotics, public company, obviously does stuff with Uber Eats here. They expect to deploy 2,000 by the end of the year. And that should get into like $60 to $80 million of revenue. Tiny, right? I mean, it's good for them, but like tiny. 2,000 robots. So it's funny, like, and I'm going to link this because, from time to time as analysts, we get on, calls with management teams, and DoorDash had a group call today, and someone asked about autonomy, and the guy like basically scoffed. He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm looking on my board here of total deliveries, and autonomous deliveries are nothing." And so then he was further asked about supply, and he's like, here's the quote: "There are physical constraints to how fast you can roll out. Like, how many can you build? And building thousands of robots is hard. And they have to learn how to do it. And we have to learn how to build hundreds efficiently before you build thousands efficiently. And then you got to build thousands before you build tens of thousands. And those are the types of numbers." This is DoorDash we're talking about here, right? Leader in food delivery. Obviously, Uber Eats being another. They're talking about tens of thousands for supply before it is relevant for their business. And this is the same issue that you and I have been discussing, and we'll continue to discuss as it relates to autonomy as well, like getting to that scale. And this is why, while Waymo's got obviously the best product in the market, they still have to get the operational ability to scale that, while other companies are developing their technology. And some of those other companies that are developing their technologies might be able to ramp faster. So the point is, because there's been a lot of debate about our moat comment from last podcast, like 2,500, which is almost the exact number that Waymo has, right, is not a moat. It's just not a moat. And whether it's for food or whether it's for humans, so we are in early stages. It is exciting that they're launching these cities, and we are confident that they will ramp that volume. We just we want to see it happen yesterday. We get less excited, or at least in my case, I get less excited now by the incremental cities and more am hopeful to get volume ramp.
And what we have to watch on the robot side is the manufacturing relationships. Serve has a manufacturing relationship with Magna. They're building the ability to scale. Just to Starship or somebody else get a relationship with Foxconn. There's something really important to watch, because I don't see these companies hand building these things. They're going to need mass manufacturing capabilities to truly scale.
Speaking of volume, our good friends at Zoox are aiming to produce 10,000 vehicles annually at a facility in the Bay Area. So here's a company talking about in the types of numbers that could matter. And Grayson, they open service to select members of the public. I don't think you're one of them, sorry. In San Francisco. The service area, however, is about 22 blocks long and 15 blocks wide. Now, I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with New York City streets. I don't know how long are these 3 mile long blocks? Like what type of service area are we talking about here?
It's like the painted ladies on Full House. We're not talking a large distance. We're talking an average walking distance. The thing that I cannot understand, you have, for all practical purposes, unlimited resources with Amazon. You've spent billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars building this company, and you deploy in this minuscule little area. Furthermore, Walt, I've had several friends that have been in Vegas over the past couple weeks. They can't get the service. It doesn't run all the time, which I got to ask, what the heck is going on? Yes, is it great to talk about ramping 10,000 vehicles? Yes. But if you're going to operate in a grandma zone, you don't need 10,000 vehicles. Where's Andy Jassy saying, we've got a competitor in Waymo that they're scaling and they've got the same financial resources that we have, and then here we are. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, Vegas is a market. I mean, I've seen Zoox there, at CES. CES is coming up soon, a little more than a month away. So we'll see what Zoox has going there. Hopefully they'll flood the market with some additional cars to show off what they can do there, since they've been testing there. If it's limited there, that will not be a good kind of poster child. By the way, for our listeners that go to CES, we'll be at the Cosmo. We'll have a suite there doing a bunch of meetings. Lightshed has an event Tuesday night. You've got Grayson and I will have a smaller event on Wednesday night. So let us know if you're at CES. It would be great to see any of your company's technologies in the autonomy space. And, that's right around the corner. I know Thanksgiving's coming up, but man, it's going to be New Year's fast. Let's go back to Zoox though. 10,000 vehicles annually. When do you think they get to that point? Who's gonna crank those out for them?
They're manufacturing them themselves. They built a facility in the Bay Area to manufacture themselves. When they get there, I don't know. I'm not even going to begin to speculate when they get there. They have the financial resources to do it. They have the talent to do it. But if you cannot deploy in a large ODD, you can not deploy in certain traffic conditions that have been widely reported on Reddit, by the way. Does it matter how many vehicles you have?
So Elon's talked about the compute that's going to be in Teslas, and if they can put out 10,000 vehicles annually, obviously Amazon is interested in this space as well. Is there any, you think, cross-fertilization that might be existing within that organization to try and utilize these cars beyond just, the rideshare that we've talked about?
I'll say this. I have a lot of questions around the corporate structure of how Zoox is run internally inside of Amazon. And I say that because look at Prime Mobility. Look at all the success that they've had scaling. Why is Zoox not on the same trajectory when Amazon has been successfully able to incubate businesses, which Prime Mobility Air is, and scale it, and then this business has not been able to? Just a question.
Yeah, I don't know. But let's move on to our final segment, listener favorite, the Foreign Autonomy Desk. What do you have for us on the Foreign Autonomy Desk this week?
WeRide, which continues their European expansion, has received a driverless permit to expand in a part of Zurich, Switzerland. So last week we talked about Baidu getting a permit to deploy in Switzerland. This week it's WeRide. So the Chinese AV companies continue to expand in Europe.
Switzerland's one of my favorite countries, although I wouldn't say Zurich is my favorite city within Switzerland. I prefer to be in the mountains, but maybe I can give me an excuse to get back to Switzerland this winter, and I'll pop over to Zurich to check out some WeRides if they're running.
I will join you, and after that, we'll take a hop, skip, and jump to the Middle East, which was one of the fastest growing markets in autonomy. And each and every week, you and I are here to break down the autonomy markets. I know next week is Thanksgiving. What else do we need to look for besides yummy turkey, nap time, and really great wine?
I mean, we got Pony AI and we got WeRide reporting. I literally just saw that my Tesla is moving on to 14.2. So we were 14.1, 2, 3 up to 8, I think I got. I will say, last week I said I was going to give an update because there are people on YouTube that continue to claim, oh, this is the best ever and it's so smooth. It is definitely better or has progressed. I'm not talking about 14.2 now. I'm talking about 14.1. Whatever number I was on, which was 8. But I do still get some random breaking, for things that it necessarily shouldn't break for. And that just does exist. And my other complaint about this, in terms of like pressing a button going from point A to point B, why that's not fully happening yet is it's the mapping. Like if I have a grocery store and there is an entry point that should only be for trucks that are going to their depot, it doesn't yet know that, no, take the first right into this parking lot to go to the grocery store. It's going, so those mistakes, which have nothing to do with like how it operates autonomously and safely, but have to do with like figuring out the dropping points at the end. And still in my driveway, there are times when it just goes past my driveway. So I think there are still some edits that have to occur before you get to, you know, this full thing. Now that doesn't mean like, I think we're all mostly at that point where, I'm not saying I do this, but being able to text and not look at the wheel. I mean, the smoothness of it is certainly much better than 14.1. We'll see what, I mean, the fact that they actually literally went to the number 14.2, I think should mean something. I looked in the notes. It didn't say anything dramatically different, but next week, you know, I'll have some more miles under my belt and I'll be able to tell you what 14.2 looks like. And just as a reminder, I think what Elon said is, I think it's 14.3 that we need to get to before you're really kind of, you know, eyes off, and at least in his mind. Who knows how long that's going to take? We could be 14.2.1, you know, 1, 2, 3. The iteration of software upgrades has been at a very rapid pace. I wouldn't say that every time I hit the next decimal point, there's a notable change. Like it is steadily getting improvements. Sometimes it feels like it's improving even in between software uploads. But just wanted to give kind of, you know, my impressions. Because again, a lot of times you get a lot of feedback online and it's been, you know, not my experience, very glowing. And these reviews have been the same since 14.1. And I'm like, I invite anyone that wants to, you know, that lives in the New York City area, if you want to hop in the car with me, you can experience it for yourself.
Well, that's very kind of you to invite our audience in your car, but I have one question, which I consider the most important guest. It's not me, the fish store owner. When are you going to take the fish store owner for a ride? What does he have to do? What does the car have to do? When are we going to do it? And are you going to videotape it for our audience?
It's the farmer's market. That will be the test. And the farmer's market's crazy because those people that go to the farmer's market, they may want to support local business and organic food, but they drive one way, the wrong way. It's kind of, that is a big test for the Tesla FSD.
Big test ahead. To our audience, we're thankful for you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Drink lots of great wine. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is scaling autonomy. Walt, until next week.